essentially, I think it can go deeper. So we can get into what I would call a spiritual or an alien realm.
Well, we're embarking on a rather strange topic tonight. We're going to talk about UFOs. Now, this is an area that most people tend to relegate to the demented or incompetent or fringe-type people.
UFOs have been the stuff of conspiracy theorists for decades, often mocked for talking about it, but maybe they shouldn't be mocked. Commander David Fravor spent 18 years as a naval aviator, a pilot. In 2004, he had an unforgettable encounter with an aircraft he said was defying the laws of physics. Former Commander Fravor joins us tonight. Thanks a lot for coming on tonight. Tell us what you saw.
Well, we had launched on a routine training mission. When we joined up, we were told that the event was going to be canceled and that we have real-world tasking, and we were sent out to the west. Now, take in mind that this has taken place about 100 miles southwest of San Diego, between San Diego and Ensenada, Mexico.
Yep.
On a clear, perfect day, blue waters. We get out to the spot where they tell us it's at. We start looking around, and both airplanes see a disturbance in the water and a white 40-foot long tic-tac shaped object just hovering above the water, going forward, back, left, right. There's no rotor wash, there's no wings, nothing. So as we drive around in a clockwise flow, we get to about the 9 o'clock position, and I said, well, I'm going to go down and check it out, and the other jet is going to stay high. So as we go down, and when we get to the 12 o'clock position, it starts to mirror us. So it's in a clockwise flow, and it's on the opposite side of the circle from us. And we continue this. It's in a climb. We're in a descent. We're getting a great look at it. This whole thing takes about probably up to 5 minutes from the time we show up. I get over to the 8 o'clock position. It's at about the 2 o'clock position, and I decide I'm going to go and see what it is, and it's about 2,000 feet below me. And I cut across the circle, and as I get within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerates to the south in about 2 seconds and disappears.
What would you estimate the speed?
Oh, well above supersonic. It like a bullet out of a gun, it took off.
So from what you know about aerodynamics, mechanics, physics, should this be possible, what you saw?
Not with the technology that we have today. Not at all.
Even now, even 13 years later, is there anything that you know of capable of this kind of behavior?
No, there's nothing I know of. I mean, when we saw the video with the IR, it has no exhaust, no discernible things of anything form of propulsion. And this thing came from a dead hover over the water, just kind of moving around, to a climb up to about 12,000 feet to rapidly accelerating away in a climb, and in less than 2 seconds it was gone. And you figure you're talking 50 miles of visibility, and you can easily see an object that size easily out to 10 miles, and it just disappeared in seconds.
So bottom line, what do you think this was?
I believe, as do the other folks that were on the flight that when we visually saw it, that it was something not from this world.
When presumably you expressed that belief to your superiors, what did they say?
Well, actually, we caught a lot of grief getting back to the boat, and it got passed off as an event that no one could explain. Now, keep in mind, they had been tracking these for 2 weeks prior to us seeing it, and this was the first time that manned airplanes had been airborne when the objects appeared.
This pilot, though, who flew Barack Obama during his 2008 presidential campaign, says UFOs are real, and he's seen one firsthand. Here to share his almost unbelievable stories, pilot Andy Danziger. Nice to see you this morning.
Good morning.
Now, we should be clear that this incident that you saw happened in 1989. Why did it take so long for you to talk about it?
There was no formal policy at my airline or any airline I've ever worked for that said not to talk about it, but it was kind of unwritten. We were young, we were new in our careers, and the way people tended to be ridiculed about all this, you just kind of kept quiet.
So this came out during a Daily News interview recently when you were asked about it.
That's correct.
Had you ever seen a UFO? And you responded that you had, and you went into detail about. So what happened in 1989 on that day?
Unbelievable. We were flying from Kansas City to Waterloo, Iowa. I was just a first officer in a commuter airline turboprop. And crystal clear skies in Kansas City, crystal clear skies forecast in Waterloo. Supposed to be good weather en route. It's only a couple 250 miles away. we reached our cruise altitude of 15,000 feet, and all of a sudden we just noticed, you know, we're busy in the climb out. Those little, smaller airplanes didn't have autopilots. Leveled out, and a lot of thin, wispy clouds all around us. I noticed off to my right, and I was sitting in the right seat, was a white disc, just kind of thin, visible, barely visible behind the clouds, or dimly visible behind the clouds. And it was a little odd, but you know, we were used to seeing a lot of things in the sky, so when you see something strange, you start looking around trying to figure out what it is. And the first thing you think about is the moon, because it looked like it could have been the moon dimly visible, but the moon was out over here and it was a crescent, it wasn't a full moon. So it couldn't have been a reflection of the moon.
So this large disk, you described it as being pretty large.
Oh, yeah.
Massive. And then after a while, it was following you.
Or we were following it. It was pacing us.
It was pacing you. Then something unbelievable happened to its shape and its color. It turned into a giant orange ball glowing in the sky?
Yeah, after we'd been looking down for searchlights and stuff from the ground, maybe something shining up on the cloud, couldn't find anything. After about 40 minutes, we started our descent into Waterloo, and as we started our descent and looked up, here's this giant red ball just above the clouds.
Unbelievable.
Oh, it was.
And there were people, of course, who witnessed this on your plane as well, not just you at
No,
the time.
the captain that was on the plane did. I don't know about any of the passengers.
Like air traffic control, I've talked to a lot of pilots here off the air in commercial breaks, and I've asked them this question, we've talked about it, and they've all admitted that they've seen UFOs, but they kind of keep quiet about it. Why is it that they keep quiet about it? Is it fear of losing their job?
I don't know. It's you don't want to be brandished as being crazy. That was one of our concerns before we actually reported it to air traffic control. We discussed it amongst each other. Is this something that's going to jeopardize our career? The government discounts every single report that ever seems to come out. The news media tends to, or at least in the past, has tended to ridicule every UFO report. So, you know, that was all going on really big back in the 1980s.
Now, the thing to think about with aliens is that it doesn't have to be little green men from Mars, right? And they don't have to come into our same three-dimensional reality. Think about what a demonic entity is. It's something that's invisible for the most part. They can seem to manifest or whatever, and we've kind of heard about this as children, or maybe you've heard about different kind of entities. But most of us grew up with this concept of some kind of a magical, spiritual dimension. And, well, maybe not most of us. I shouldn't speak for all of us, but certainly I did. Growing up in the Christian church, grew up with this idea of angels and demons and stuff. But what is an angel or a demon?
But one of the things you and I have to face is what is the real reality here? Is this just a bunch of nonsense, a composite of hoaxes and pranks by various people through the years? Or is there something really going on?
So you found a controversial verse in Genesis 6, which has to do with a prophecy that Jesus said.
Let's start with, I start with Jesus, and in Matthew 24, he gives 4 disciples an inside briefing on his second coming. And in that briefing, he makes a very strange remark. He says, as the days of Noah were, so shall the days of the coming of the Son of Man be. Now, many people presume he just meant that it was because of the business as usual. So anyway, the point is, we need to understand what the days of Noah were like in order to understand what he was saying. So that takes us to Genesis 6, and when you jump into Genesis 6, you quickly discover that very few seminaries teach what that passage really says. And so the first, as you get into that Genesis 6, you have to understand the first 2 verses are one sentence, and it deals with this strange goings-on between the fallen angels producing hybrids with humans. And that was so uncomfortable in the early years of the church that it was the understanding of the early rabbis. It was also the understanding of the early church that what it was dealing with was fallen angels cohabiting with human women producing a strange hybrid offspring. But when you get to about the 5th century, that was a very uncomfortable posture. So they cooked up this, what they call the lines of Seth argument, and that's what's taught in most seminaries. One of the things I discover is that many people who are seminary products of most seminaries haven't been taught that there are different perspectives of Genesis 6, and it's the literal, careful study version of Genesis 6 that starts to raise the fog on this whole issue.
Now tell me about the word Nephilim. What does that mean?
In the Hebrew, it comes from the verb nephal. It means the fallen ones, and that's the term used. Don't confuse that with the fallen angels. The fallen angels, according to Genesis 6, cohabited with human women to produce a hybrid offspring that are called in the Hebrew the Nephilim. In the Septuagint version of the Old Testament, the translation of the Old Testament into Greek, they use the word gigantes, which is transliterated giants, right. And they did happen to be giants, but that's not what the word means. The word actually means, in the Greek, the earthborn. And so, from the Greek point of view, they're earthborn. From the Hebrew point of view, they're the fallen ones. But either way, they're pointing to a hybrid, and it apparently was part of Satan's plan to contaminate the Messianic line.
Could it also be an alien? Is it really an interdimensional being that exists in a different format of reality that I'm not maybe specifically aware of, that can interact with our world through whatever various means? And also, if they're existing in a different dimension, what kind of special abilities or powers do they have? For example, are they able to navigate time differently than us?
This was a small reactor about the size of a hemisphere, about the size of a basketball, on a metal plate. And when it was running, it produced a gravitational field of its own. Now, this is something that we can't do. We can't produce any gravity. The only way we get gravity is from large quantities of mass. But there's no machine we can have that turns on that makes gravity. Like, you can turn on an electromagnet and it makes a magnetic field. We can't make a gravitational field. Anyway, this device was producing that. And Barry said, almost like he was bragging, go ahead, try and touch the sphere. And I couldn't. It pushed my hands away, just like two like poles of a magnet. So that was...
so like when you take two magnets and you try to press them together and they push against each other?
Yeah, that kind of cushion feeling, but you can't get them together. The closer you put them, the more they push. But
and you felt that physically with
my
your hand?
Yeah, now there's nothing that does that. And that immediately caught my attention, going, wow, this is something else.
What was your thought? Like when you felt that and you knew that there was nothing that you were aware of that could produce
then
this?
that connected me to the briefings that I read on the first day at S4 was that, everything that I had read was apparently accurate.
What were you reading?
It was kind of an overview. This project was to back engineer the alien craft. And specifically, it was to try and back engineer and see if we can duplicate the technology with available materials.
Are they able to access information in a different way? Like, how much more powerful than us are they? And are they bigger than us? There's all these questions.
There is a book that I have an extensive library, but someone was kind enough to add this to it, by Stephen Quayle, which is an encyclopedia of giants, all relating to Genesis 6 and other subjects. And this came out in 2002. I'm just giving you a couple of snapshots. It's amazing. He has a catalog here of hundreds of giants in human history that we have records of or pictures of. Here's a couple of guys. You wouldn't want to meet them in a dark alley, would you? Here's a guy 9 foot 4 inches, Makhnoff and Chiquita. These are, of course, used in shows and stuff back in turn of the century. Here's a gal by the name of Lady Amma. She was 22 years old, 7 foot 9 inches, with two elder sisters. You notice the one of them is very small. She ends up marrying a Chinese dwarf. These are from the late 19th century. Here's Captain Martin Van Buren and his wife, Mrs. Ann Bates. Both of them about 8 feet tall. She was actually a little taller than he was, or very close to it. He was born in Kentucky in 1847, and they, of course, were on exhibit throughout Europe, but these pictures were part of the promotion and so forth. I could go on, but just to give you some there are records of giant people, 10, 13 feet kinds of people, and skeletons, hundreds of them. It's one part of Stephen Quayle's book highlights the fact that for strange reasons, they always get covered up. You really have to do some digging to get the records and stuff. He spent 30 years pulling his encyclopedia together.
So when we talk about Satanism, and about human sacrifice and ritual and all this weird stuff going on, one of the questions is why would we do it? If it's just a purely physical world, there doesn't seem to be a lot of reason to be so depraved. I can't imagine why you would do that other than potentially a blackmail scheme, but even that seems a little far-fetched. Why would you be pushing so hard to get people into it? So I would argue that there very well could be a spiritual, and really by spiritual I mean an alien, an interdimensional or multidimensional aspect to this thing that's happening in our society, and that is fueling the satanic ritual because of the way the physics work between dimensions.
This archontic force does not operate in this dimension in the sense that this is not its frequency. So if it wants to pull it to be its frequency, but it can't be its frequency at the moment. So it needs a vehicle within visible light to work on its behalf while it works from the hidden. And so certain bloodlines were created specifically to be that vehicle. Now these bloodlines are like the in-betweeners, if you like. You've got the visible light frequency band, and you've got the entities outside of the band. These are the representatives within this frequency which can interact with this frequency and do the bidding of this hidden force. And like I say, it's like the scientist who can't work inside a tank with something that's dangerous, so he puts the gloves on and works from outside the tank and works in it through the gloves. If you take the scientist to be this archontic force, the tank to be our reality, and the gloves to be these bloodlines, that is the dynamic that we're looking at between this hidden force and the one we see. So what has been created is a hierarchy coming out of the hidden down into the seen to create and direct a society that generates maximum low vibrational energy and systematically imposes the virus upon our society more and more and more. The scale of child abuse worldwide, shocking beyond belief. Yes, this is the question. We need to keep asking about everything. Why? Then you might find answers. Why is Satanism and pedophilia so interrelated and interconnected? Well, this is a Central American shaman, Don Juan Matos, who said this about entities, the archons that he called the flyers, describe him in the same way, feeding off the energy of children. Sorcerers, people who can see beyond the physical, see infant human beings as strange luminous balls of energy, covered from top to bottom with a glowing coat, something like a coat of plastic adjusted tightly around the cocoon of energy. The glowing coat of awareness is what the predators consume, and when a human reached adulthood, all that is left of that fringe awareness is a narrow fringe that goes from the ground to the top of the toes. That fringe permits mankind to keep living, but only barely. What they are after is the energy of children before puberty. We see puberty as a hormonal chemical change. That is merely a holographic expression of an energetic change in the waveform information field. They want that energy before that change takes place. And so these pedophiles are possessed by these entities that stimulate the desire for sex with children. And while it's happening, they are, through the vehicle of the pedophile, drawing off the child's energy. And the reason that you have so many pedophiles in the upper echelons of society, he said advisedly, is because they are the bloodlines, the dual DNA bloodlines, most possessable, most possessed, and therefore the best vehicles for feeding off children by these entities.